Good afternoon. It's Jeffrey Christian of CPM Group. It's just past 12 noon here on Thursday, the 7th of December. I'm recording this Thursday for release on Friday, the 8th of December. It's Pearl Harbor Day, and it's kind of appropriate that it is Pearl Harbor Day because today I'm going to talk about silver use in military hardware. And titled this Silver-Plated Missiles because there's a lot of wildly overestimated amounts of silver used in missiles that's circulating on the internet today. A couple topics today. We are producing a silver a commentary, CPM market commentary on silver use in military. It'll be released to our clients and our broader contact list later today. And it will be available to people who are not on our distribution list, downloadable from our website sometime next week. Before I get into that issue, let me talk a little bit about a quick market update. We had an exciting opening on Sunday night in New York when COMEX reopened at 6 o'clock, about 6:18. There was a period of about 20 minutes when there were several thousand contracts representing about 4 million ounces over 20 minutes coming in from hundreds, if not thousands, of computer-generated orders from various individual and institutional investors. It drove the gold price to a record $2,152. Up about $54 from Friday's close. It stayed there about 20 minutes, and then it came back down and ultimately fell about $130 later in the trading day, Monday. The price has stabilized around $2,040, $2,060 since that time, and that's about it. And nothing really notable there. Silver also rose sharply at that time, as did platinum and petroleum, and there was a sell-off in the S&P equity index futures at that time, all of which pretty much reversed during the trading day Monday. Silver's been trading around $24.26, I think, as I write. So our expectation has been that the prices would be rising in December and into next year, and we still think that's possible. The potential for a pullback, some further profit taking does exist in gold and silver, as well as in other commodities and the overall equity market. But from a longer term perspective, we expect precious metals prices, at least gold and silver, to rise. I want to throw out another thing. There were, conspiracy theorists love to say when something like that happens, as it happened on Sunday evening, oh, it must be one big bank or some manipulator whacking the market. And in fact, it's hundreds of traders, many of whom use similar or not the same packaged program trading that has their computer generate buy and sell signals. And what happened last week was that prices settled above buy signals on Friday. So when trading resumed on the COMEX and CME platforms on Sunday night, those buy orders cascaded into the market. It wasn't a large entity or manipulators hitting the market. This is the way modern markets work. And we don't like it necessarily, and the SEC talks about trying to find some way to limit program trading in equities. They don't have control over commodities, but this is the way it's been really for several decades, and unfortunately it's probably going to continue this way for some time. Now, in advance of the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, somebody was shorting Israeli shares and equity ETFs that had Israeli stocks in them on the New York markets. And again, the conspiracy theorists assumed that some bank or brokers had prior knowledge of Hamas's attack. investigators are looking into it, and what they have found so far is that there were entities that were related to Hamas and to the Iranian government that appeared to have been selling these equities and ETFs short, knowing what was coming on the weekend. It's a little bit aside, but that's there. Now, silver used in military hardware. There is a meme or whatever you would call it going around among silver promoters and silver conspiracy theorists that there's an enormous amount of silver in missiles. And they keep talking about, 482, 500 ounces of silver in each Tomahawk missile. It's not like that. And so we want to talk a little bit about this. I have talked in recent videos about the idea that, total military uses of silver are probably on the order of 10 or 20 million ounces a year worldwide. About half or more of that actually occurs within the United States. A lot of the use of silver in various military hardware is actually manufactured in the United States and sold to other countries, the U.S. being one of the 5 largest sellers and exporters of arms, along with Russia, China, the UK, and France, the 5 permanent members of the UN. Anyway, it's not like that. Now, the amount of silver that is used in individual armaments and pieces of military equipment is top secret. The government goes to great lengths to not reveal that information. That said, there are people at contractors who build these things, and there are people within the Defense Department and the military who know this. And informed sources say that Tomahawk missiles, which are very large missiles, don't have 500 ounces of silver. One wag said, well, maybe we tell the military that to justify the multi-million-dollar price for each Tomahawk missile. But the reality is that it's probably closer to 10 to 15 ounces of silver per Tomahawk missile. Now, what that comes down to, and you're going to have to excuse me, I'm going to look at some numbers here that we've run some calculations. Since 1983, so 40 years, there have been 2,193 Tomahawk missiles fired during military operations. 2,193. Some people say, let's round it up to 2,300. At 482 ounces per missile, that would be 1 million ounces of silver used over 40 years. Now, there's additional stockpiles. The U.S. military alone has about 4,000 Tomahawk missiles, and that would obviously be closer to 2 million ounces of silver in those Tomahawk missiles. So, and then there's probably several thousand, let's say another 4,000 missiles that the U.S. has sold to various countries, allies and would-be allies and former allies. So even at those high numbers, it's 1, 2, 3 million ounces just for Tomahawks. But the reality is that it's closer to 15 ounces of silver per Tomahawk. That means that all of those Tomahawks that have been fired off over the 42 years would have used 32,000 ounces, 1 ton of silver. 1 ton of silver. And the stockpile of U.S. Tomahawks would be holding about 60,000 ounces of silver. So the use of silver in Tomahawk missiles is a fraction of what silver promoters and conspiracy theorists and just strange people on the internet suggest. So that's puts it into reality. Now, there are smaller missiles. Most of the missiles that you see on the news being fired in Ukraine or in the Middle East or elsewhere have less than 1 ounce of silver. In Tomahawks and in those smaller missiles, the silver primarily is used in an ignition battery, a battery that triggers the liquid or solid fuels, depending on which kind of missile it is, and in solder on the electronic circuitry. They tend not to use it in contacts and connectors. They tend to use gold or palladium or platinum. So the silver use is pretty much limited to solders and an ignition battery in missiles. Torpedoes have silver batteries, and those batteries have several, or they tend to have maybe an ounce or two of silver in them, and there are a lot of torpedoes out there. They tend not to get used in military operations. I was trying to figure out when the last time the U.S. used a torpedo in a military operation, and I think it goes back to World War II. So there is a stock of silver that is in torpedoes, and those batteries get rotated out and replaced so that there's always fresh batteries that have a full charge in them, but that's there. There are people on the internet who will tell you that silver is used in bullets. It's not. That little white dot at the bottom of a shell casing, that's called a primer. It's stainless steel. There's no silver in bullets. And if you look at the history of silver in military applications, the biggest use was in photography from World War II through Vietnam. In this market commentary, we talk about the history of silver use in military, silver stockpiles. The U.S., I'll get back to that in a second. And the two biggest uses of silver in World War II, one was the 1.3 billion ounces that the Treasury lent to allies, India, a couple Middle Eastern countries, a couple other Asian countries, some European countries, to help them support their currencies during the war. 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion ounces were lent through the Lend-Lease Acts from 1942 through 1944. By 1948, almost all of that had been returned to the U.S. Treasury. That's in this report. The other big use on a military basis was photography. Photography for reconnaissance work was new in World War II, and it continued through Vietnam. In recent conflicts and subsequently, silver-based photography has been replaced by digital photography. So the use of silver in photography really for reconnaissance purposes is no more. They do use some to produce high quality printed copies of digital images for use in congressional testimony and things like that. But it's a much smaller thing. So those are sort of the uses of it. In this market commentary, we talk about this. We talk about the Lend-Lease Act. We talk about the strategic stockpile. The U.S. military did not have silver as a strategic or critical metal, and it didn't have a stockpile until the 1960s, June 1968, in fact. The military did not think of silver as something they needed to stockpile. The Treasury had 1 billion and then 2 billion and then 3.3 billion ounces of silver peaking in 1942. And that Treasury silver, 3.3 billion ounces at the start of World War II, was always available to the military if it needed it. So the military didn't have its own silver stockpile. In the 1960s, the Treasury was getting out of using silver as backing for silver certificates and silver in circulating coinage. And they sold several billion ounces a couple billion ounces of silver, either in coinage form or in outright bullion sales, while they extricated silver from the currency system. By June 1968, they had completed that. They took the last 165 million ounces of silver that they had at the Treasury stocks, and they gave it to the Defense Department for the National Defense Stockpile. The Defense Department did not want it. Congress and the administration mandated that the Defense Department take it just because they wanted to get it off of the Treasury's balance sheet. In 1970, a couple of years later, they transferred 25.5 million ounces back to the Treasury for use in commemorative coins, and they had about 139 million ounces. This is all explained in this market commentary. Also, the creation of the Silver Eagle. I'm proud to say I was personally involved in the creation of the gold, silver, platinum, and palladium eagles, as well as Royal Canadian and Perth and other coins, bullion coins of various metals. I was personally involved in helping to structure and create the Silver Eagle program, and we discussed that in this market commentary and how it was designed in part to use that 139 million ounces that the Defense Department had in the strategic stockpile that had been foisted on it by the Congress and Western mining interests in 1968, and how the Defense Department had wanted to sell it, couldn't sell it for congressional mandated reasons, but were able to use it up in the Silver Eagles. It's all in that silver commentary. If you want that silver commentary, CPM Group produces silver market alerts, which we give to our paying clients and to friends of CPM. We also produce market commentaries that we distribute more broadly to the press and non-clients, as well as clients and friends of CPM. We are producing and releasing a market commentary today called Silver-Plated Missiles, Silver Use in Military Hardware. It covers and it expands upon what I've talked about here. If you are not a client and you're not receiving market commentaries, but you want to receive this market commentary and future market commentaries, you need to go to our website, cpmgroup.com, and register and sign up to be on our distribution list. We call it mailing list, but it's really a distribution list at this point. The report will be posted probably sometime next week, so probably early next week. Our existing list will get it hopefully today, maybe tomorrow, and then we will post it on the website next week. So if you want this and you're not on our distribution list, go to cpmgroup.com and sign up to receive future market commentaries and other releases that we make. That's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.